we mentioned earlier in the previous episodes, that crisis club thing can vary from one club to another club. Sometimes it's you, sometimes it's someone else. But something that's been consistent in the Premier League for a long, long time is the standard of refereeing, which has always been in crisis. And I think that is something that we'll be talking about today as well. So, with that, welcome to the Talkie Taka podcast, listeners. On the panel today, we have RK and Radhaji. RK, how have you been? What's it been for you? United potentially lurching into a full blown crisis, or is it a blip even now? I don't know. How do you call it?
It's it's definitely not lurching anymore into a full blown crisis. It's a proper full blown crisis. 9 points from 7 games in the league, two losses in the Champions League on the brink of, I would say, it's looking very bleak how United would qualify for the next stage from this kind of form. So losing every other match, definitely, it's we are in the right in the middle, bang in the middle of a full blown crisis. Injury wise, still a crisis. So there's no real good news around the club right now. Ownership still how it was 1 year back. So all things considered, this is the first. I never thought that there would be questions around Eric Ten Hag in September and October. So that's where we are. But for me, the moment of the week, of course, was something more than United. It's something that you were referencing, and during the match, I remember how all of us basically who were watching it live and commenting were like, how is this not onside? And once all the details unraveled one after the other, that all the mega bloopers one after the other, it was a real comic show. So I think that's my talking moment of the week over and above United.
Yeah, really well done, guys. Job well done. This was well done. The referee telling the VAR telling the assistant VAR. Extremely fun. And all through this, Radhaji was shaking his head, going, "Nope, I want a replay." Radhaji,
So
do you still
Radhaji
want a
had
replay?
so much faith, swag in the whole VAR process that when me and Up pointed out that this is not offside. So Radha was very matter of fact that it's a normal like real time offside hai kya? Like what's the problem and all. Then he realized, okay.
Yeah, so when I saw it on real time, I thought it looked offside. And then when I saw the replay, I'm like, okay, they've clearly not shown us the right replay, the real replay, because after they gave it offside, yeah, it must not have been this view that we saw. I want to see the real one. And then, oh man, what transpired?
Yeah. And on that related note, is that your talkie point as well, Radhaji, or are you plumping for something else, maybe something more positive?
I'm going for a positive. Considering the rest of this episode is only going in one direction, that's completely downhill from a mood point of view for me. So I'm going to go Darwin Nunes, who played a grand total of 0 minutes in the game against Tottenham Hotspur, but social media is just full of clips of Darwin Nunes after the game. And you can see that he's got some fire in him, this guy. He went up to the crowd. He was being restrained by the assistant coach as soon as the final whistle blew because he just charged onto the pitch ready to fight with anybody and everybody. And he was just celebrating with the crowd. He was punching his badge and riling the crowd up after it. I think he just symbolizes the feeling of the Liverpool fan group right now, which is a lot of siege mentality, and there's a lot of just okay, let's see what you can do next kind of mentality going on within the fan group, and Darwin is at the forefront of that. So yeah, for me, he was my takeaway for positive takeaway for this season. 0 minutes played, he would have come on and maybe changed the game before that second red card, but he sat on the bench and then played a part after the game, and the whole fan group is now completely behind him. So yeah, Darwin Nunes is my talking about.
Yeah. Before we get into the Liverpool Spurs game in more detail, my talking point was if you know that Chelsea beat Fulham 2-0, and Mikhailo Mudryk, the man who inspired 1,000 memes finally scored his first goal for the club, and it later emerged that there was footage as soon as he scored the goal. You can see in the background that Enzo and Caicedo turn to each other and they're so happy that they hug each other because Mudryk has finally scored, or Chelsea has finally scored after something like 300 odd minutes in the Premier League. So I think many friendships are born out of adversity, and this might be something that if we don't get points, maybe it's not the points, it's the friends we make while on the journey that matters. So yeah, that's my silver lining from the current crisis.
Swag,
That's
there's 225 million pounds between them. I think everybody can give a rat's ass whether they're friends or not as long as they deliver.
I said, I'm just trying to look for silver linings amongst the crisis clouds right now. But yeah, let's come to the Liverpool Spurs game, the thing that's hot property right now. Even as we speak, I think Klopp has just gone on and said it should be replayed. That's the only logical explanation. Uh, just just talk us through what your thought process was. Of course, at that point, as you said, you felt like, okay, this is not a regular offside, or maybe we are not seeing the correct view. But then at the press conference, I think the post-match press conference, that was when it emerged that okay, Pogmol did admit again that they made an error. There was a human error of judgment and things like that, etc., etc. And was it yesterday that the audio was released? And it's basically it's it's a bit like the movie Inception, where it's going down levels of shit. Like you went down level of dreams in that movie, now you're going levels of shit down. First you have the error, then you have the acknowledgement of the error and a weirdly stated message, then you have the audio which basically just, apart from the error, just the chaos of uh, the entire process of four people shouting at each other. How is a VAR guy even supposed to make a decision is my first question.
Okay, so I'm going to get some easy stuff out of the way about the game. I think very heroic performance from Liverpool. A lot of the siege mentality thing is also behind the performance that we put up. We were the better team with 11 men. We were the better team with 10 men in the first half. In the second half, I think they had their chances, but we looked like we could score as well with 10 men. When it went to 9 men, just pure heroic. I loved it. Loved the boys. Great job. Okay, now let's come to what everybody has been talking about for the last 1 week. Okay, so the rules apparently state that once play has restarted, you can't be bringing it back or you can't correct it. Why are you here? Why is VAR here? VAR is here to solve a problem which is about ruling out such stupid errors. And that is the core reason for its existence. And if you're going to then lean on a technicality and say that, oh, I can't undo a colossal error because it's been 7 seconds since they kicked off play, that's just absolutely ridiculous. I just don't understand the point of this VAR if it can't solve something. The second thing that bothers me, the communication. Check complete. That's the official communication that such an important crazy system works on. You just say check complete. You can't say goal. You can't say offside, onside. You can't do any of that. You just say check complete. There are like 7 people talking to each other, and nobody could figure out that there's been a fucking howler, man. I just don't understand how this could happen. Don't hide behind protocols. It's just ridiculous. They've given a penalty after the final whistle of a match. This same VAR system with all its protocols has done that. And you can't solve a problem which is just 7 seconds of nothingness that happened. Immediately after that, Liverpool conceded. We ended up losing the game. We've lost 2 leagues by 1 point in the last 4 years, 5 years. Don't tell us that this kind of shit can be just swept under the carpet with sorry. That just doesn't work. I think Howard Webb has lost his right to solve this problem behind closed doors. When you fuck up at work, people open a committee, they check the facts, somebody renders a decision. This needs to be like that. This has to be an independent review, not Howard Webb deciding how to solve this problem and what to do next. Somebody else needs to look into this entire thing and figure out what all is wrong with it. Communication is the bare minimum to fix. As a football fan, this needs to be better for every club. As a Liverpool fan, we are getting screwed like repeatedly now for questionable decisions. This one was just took it to the next level. So I'm happy if this auto corrects in the opposite direction now, because this is not acceptable whatsoever.
Yeah, there are so many simple, all of these things are so elementary, so simple that you can't even believe that these are the kind of things, which are going wrong week in, week out. It's like the thing that struck me the most was now people are talking about the replay and how the result is so unfair and, rightly so. But 10 seconds, exactly what Radha was saying, was the first thing that came to my mind back then as well. You're just 10 seconds into a restart. You have already realized when the final, replays and everything came out yesterday. This was the strong thing in my mind that 10 seconds into the restart, you know that you have massively made a blunder. You can still call it back. There's nothing that's happened. What's stopping you? I mean, just a literal rule that you can't basically do something once a game are restarted, and then people spend the next 1 week talking about how unjust this is and how this the game should be replayed when you just needed to replay the last 10 seconds. That's it. Take the decision back, give the goal, nothing has changed, start all over again. I can't just fathom, okay, you made a mistake, which is inexplicable as it is. But once you realize that mistake, you can't do anything about it. That's something I can't understand. And, I'm just looping back to something that happened in the United game as well, because I think this is the right time to talk about it. I don't think it impacted the result because we were pathetic, but these kind of things, where Joel Ward had his back to the ball, he had no idea, or he had an idea that Bruno was passing it to Rash, and he was already in a position to face Rash once Rash got the ball. His hand is outstretched inside the box. The ball strikes his hand. For me, it's a clear and obvious error of the defender. It doesn't matter that he's not aware of the ball striking his hand. It's a clear and obvious error by the player, and it should be a penalty any time of the day because it denied us a shot or a attack on goal. So all these kind of things, the decisions that go on behind it, what makes me think is if they are going to offer apologies and they are going to basically give audio footages, are they going to do that now for every decision? Because they need to. You can't just give footages. And I mean, it's not worth anything to Liverpool, I know, but if you're going to do it for one decision, you better do it for every single decision then. And so one of the changes that needs to be made is, just like Europe, make everything transparent in live itself. Why have a question which decision got replayed and shown to the public later on and which did not? Why have that unjustness? Show it live, let everyone know in real time what's happening, so that there's nothing left for any secrecy.
Yeah, see, transparency is the answer. There is no other way to do this, and I think a lot of other sports do it transparently. You can hear what the commentator says. You can hear what the third umpire says in DRS when it's happening in cricket. You can apparently hear it in rugby, although I haven't watched it, but I've read over the last 1 week that it happens in rugby as well. So I mean that is the way forward. The only thing, RK, that I will disagree with is, or not disagree with, um, the decision that you talked about in the United game is still something that people debate. Like this happened in games where I am, for example, personally, I'm of the belief that if it's completely inadvertent, I feel like handballs need not be given. Now, at the same time, you feel that it was definitely an opportunity and it should have been given, but that is still a debate. These kinds of things, right? These kinds of things are exactly why VAR was brought in, to prevent these stupid errors, but VAR caused this error. And it's not a debatable thing where we're talking about, okay, it's somebody's interpretation of something, and somebody thinks that this is the way it should be applied. No, it's a basic error, and the words that they use were human error. You can't write this off as human error and just let it go. What's happening next? I need some action to happen. I need somebody's heads to roll on this. I need some future solution of this problem so that it never happens again, to come out of this. And I don't believe that Howard Webb and co are going to be the answer for that. It has to be an independent third party investigation. Proper rules and regulations are set up, and they need to adhere by that. It can't just be left as is. And Klopp said the same thing. So Klopp did, and now this is going to make the headlines for the next 5 days. Klopp said replay, but in the same sentence, Klopp says that replay, we should, for me, it's so unprecedented that it should be a replay, or you solve that problem during the match, which is what I think is the most logical thing for anyone to have done. He also said that, okay, you felt that enough time has passed on, get both of the managers together and just tell them, listen, managers, I've screwed up. Let Liverpool score a goal now and let's continue the match. That is also a more acceptable solution than now where we are and we're saying, oh no, let's replay the game, or let's figure out what this is. And say, I'm not one for the replay. It's not something that I subscribe to. But these are basic things that could have been done to solve. And that's it. Coming to the other decision, right, Curtis? That's a perfect example of the acceptable form of a debate, right? Where Curtis, I feel like it's very unlucky. Other people will feel like it's very dangerous, and there will always be debate on those, and they will always go sometimes your way, sometimes the other way. But again, now these guys are rule following and protocol following assets, right? So this is what the protocol states. Slow motion replays are mainly used for factual situations. For example, to identify the point of contact of a physical offense or the position of an offense. Normal speed replays are used for subjective judgments, for example, to determine the intensity of an offense or whether or not a handball was punishable. Now, when he walked up to the screen, there was 5 seconds of a still image of Curtis Jones's boot on his shin. Obviously, that's a red card. If anybody sees that, they're giving it a red card. Second, every single video he saw after that was a slow motion video. Every single was a slow mo, which is not what you use to determine intensity or anything of that sort. So there was a slow motion of front, back, side, and then the one angle which they showed everybody on TV and they didn't show the VAR was where he clearly gets the ball, rolls over it, gets the contact. They didn't even show that angle. No, so what rules and protocol are you even following? So in the one hand for the Diaz goal, oh listen, it's all protocol. I can't, my hands are up, I can't do anything. And then you don't follow your own protocol for slow motion and the regular speed and stills. It's bullshit. I don't buy their argument. I think maybe the VAR thought that, hey, if let's just leave this, maybe nobody will bring it up after the game because nobody knows what we're talking about it anyway. And I'm glad that there's a lot of pressure on it. I'm okay for Liverpool to be completely unreasonable. Ask for 3 points, ask for points to be added also. I'd be as unreasonable as possible. Get these guys to actually get their act together, man. We deserve some better quality. We've talked about it on this pod for almost every episode, and that's not okay.
Yeah, I do remember this has been a topic for us since last season. In fact, even at the end of last season, this was one of those things that we wanted to see bettered in the upcoming season. And 7 games in, not only has it not been bettered, it's basically going down the drain. Uh, I'm I am reminiscent of this thing that Italy seems to be doing this better than the Premier League in terms of them having semi-automated offside decisions, which happen real time. They don't need the VAR intervention so much. There's not so much chaos. If a relatively poorer, definitely poorer league can implement that technology, do it well, make it make sense, then why can't the Premier League do it? Is it I mean, I don't subscribe to virtually any conspiracy theories, but is this something that the referees are pressuring the Premier League into? Is it the Premier League that's doing this? I have no idea, but it just doesn't make sense. And as you said, it's not about Liverpool, it's not about United, it's about the incompetencies of the officials. There's this thing about them just having come back 48 hours ago from UAE, having refereed a game there. I don't know. I don't consider that they would have. It would have been the fatigue, because when you listen to the transcript, there's nothing about the fatigue. I'll just take a second
Why
to
not?
just
Why
mention what.
not, Swag? I think all of us watched the game that Liverpool played last week, the one against West Ham. I think most of us would have watched it where we were the early kickoff after everybody got back on a Wednesday or a Thursday. Did anybody see how McAllister was in that game? He was a completely different player. He was completely a shadow of himself. And this is a professional footballer, one of the fittest people in the world. And he clearly couldn't take a Thursday to Saturday kind of thing physically, mentally, whatever it was, he wasn't able to cope with it. So why are we to believe that refs are an exception to this? So I'm not a conspiracy believer at all, but why the hell should refs be allowed to ship out to Saudi Arabia for a Thursday, come back on Saturday, and then Premier League and referee a Premier League game? What kind of proprietary? If you don't want questions to be asked about, if you don't want conspiracy theories, then at least save your own ass, man. Like make some basic rules that have common sense in them. The added thing, and this is where conspiracies are going to come from. Saudi is different. It's not the Bundesliga, it's not La Liga. Saudi is different. Saudi owns one of the clubs in the Premier League. Saudi offers people money that nobody else in the world is offering. you're opening yourself up to this kind of criticism, man. Anybody who has done some basic understanding of PR would know that this looks bad. So I mean, it's a little, just be a little careful on this. Set some rules, guidelines. You can't just let people go all over the place.
Yeah, and if you just want to make things worse on the conspiracy angle, as RK is pointing out, it wasn't Saudi, it was UAE, which basically owns Man City. So it's a direct championship rival. Which, but
I said Saudi
yeah,
because it's
I take
more in the news. But
yeah, but yeah, just going back before we move on from this, just going back to this and the transcript. Replay operator, are you happy with this? Assistant VAR, yeah, yeah, offside, goal. That's wrong. That does what the VAR says, and then says the on-field decision was offside. Are you happy with this image? This image is onside, but the decision was given was offside, and VAR goes, oh, expletive. I'm just reading out the transcript, and the replay operator keeps trying to make things okay. He keeps trying to say delay, delay. All he's saying to delay, all he's saying to delay, and the VAR keeps going, pardon, can't do anything. Ollie, Ollie's saying to delay. Ollie, yeah, delay the game to delay the game. What? No, they've restarted. It's okay. It's like something out of Looney Tunes. Imagine Ollie saying to delay. Ollie, who Ollie? And it's just so crazy. It's an altogether amazing level of incompetence throughout. And leave aside the incompetence, as I said at the start as well, just the amount of chaos that they're putting into the process. Even the process of evaluating a decision, they need to make it more simpler, more straightforward. I was listening to it, maybe they're used to doing it, but six voices at the same time shouting at each other, and you have to make a decision in 5 seconds. I'm not surprised they're making such shitty decisions. I'm probably expecting more to come in the next few days.
Unfortunately, all this, every week we talk about it and everyone talks about it, just takes away, all the focus from what are actually, pretty good football matches as well. Spurs have been having a really good start to the season. They have been riding this, feel good factor. And I think for a large part of the match, they did play well as well. I think, especially with 10 men against 10 men, they did create chances. Looked like, that they could basically finish one of those. But of course, we were also commenting on the group that, ultimately it's Spurs. You bank on them not to basically do what they're expected to do and take it down to the wire, which is kind of what happened. I think after they got to 9 men, I think 9 men onwards, for me personally, it felt like, they were really toothless. They were not really threatening Liverpool at all. Of course, credit to Liverpool as well. But when you are down to 9 men, it shouldn't be about the opposition. It becomes far simpler than, just being 10 men, playing against 10 men. So I think I expected a lot more from Spurs, and I think there were a few managerial bloopers in there as well, like taking off Son, taking off Madison. When you're trying to win a game, you have to win against 9. So I think the result finally, after really heroic resistance, as Radha said, a simple, tired mistake by Matip kind of allowed Spurs to paper over the cracks, I feel. But looking to their next fixtures, I think they have a good run. So definitely expect them to, keep getting the points and be in the good news for a while more. But I think I'm still looking for that, slightly down the road Spurs slump, which I'm not writing off Postecoglou something. It's really good job that they're doing, but I think Spurs are getting a bit more kudos than I think they are performing. The level of praise and the points is more than the performance, I feel.
see, I disagree with the last statement. I think they're playing as well as, okay, from a results point of view. Maybe their points are a little bit ahead of what maybe XG would suggest and things like that. But they are playing well, and I'm not so interested in their performances against the big teams. I think they were completely second best in the Arsenal game and in the first half of the Liverpool game. But against the smaller teams, they are looking quite effective. So I think they'll do well. The only thing I will give them on their behalf is nobody knows really what to do with 9 men. And from a Liverpool perspective, even with 10 men, we were still looking to win the game. There were obviously going to be gaps. The moment it became 9, we took off our two strikers and we went 5-3-0. And these are like 8 supremely fit, extremely good tactical, technical players. It is obviously going to be difficult to break down somebody who's put 8 people specifically to do one job. I can sympathize a little bit with that. I think they were getting beat by 10 men. So yeah, and I think Spurs should have lost that game if we hadn't gone down to 9. Jota deserved the second yellow, but I still don't believe the first was a yellow. So again, questionable decision. We didn't even talk about this given everything else that went on in the game. He was just running back when the first yellow happened. I still don't know what exactly happened for it to be a foul. The second yellow was obvious. He was silly. He needed to get that second yellow. So all in all, I'm just overall just really furious. But the character from us, it didn't feel like a loss. It really, in some ways, felt so reinvigorating for the fan base. I think it's really lit a fire on everyone. There's a proper siege mentality going on anywhere that you look. Anybody who to do with Liverpool, I think the players are on social media. They look really up for this season, and so am I, man.
Rather, we'll come to how tough it is to play against 10 men and 9 men when we talk of United. Don't worry.
Yeah, now that we've talked about Spurs, I think it's fair that we talk about their neighbors as well. Arsenal, we gave them a lot of credit. Okay, they're doing well, and they're doing well in the Champions League as well. And they've gone on and just lost to Lens away 2-1. And we'll talk about the Talkie game later as well. But obviously, it's got to be Arsenal Man City. That's not a confidence booster when you have to go and play the champions of Europe next. And even such a game which is not a title decider right now, but it would be a big step for them if they were able to beat Man City. So what are your thoughts on Arsenal, this blip that seems to have hit them? They lost to Lens, they drew at home to Spurs, and now they have to face City, and potentially without Saka.
Yeah, I think we have talked about it in the past as well, where I was not really impressed by Arsenal for long patches of the season. Uh, there have been, especially we talked about their issues in, ball progression. I think till the United game, they weren't able to, or they weren't playing, not able to specifically, but they weren't playing their best 11 till the United game. And after that, I think they got some rhythm going when, they got Zinchenko back, they started getting Jesus back. So definitely what seems to come out is that with their strongest team and with the, pattern, the template that they know, they're still a good team. They won last weekend, I think, against Bournemouth 4-0. They had a couple of other good results as well. Uh, so they seem to do well when they know what they're doing, when they have those combinations that play for them week in week out. But the moment they get a few injuries, uh, Saka has faced a couple of injuries now, and probably again he got an injury in the last game. There was talk about him missing a few games as well, which didn't happen. But whenever these things happen and when the depth comes in, uh, Martinelli is not there now. So now you see the replacements that they're a real step down on the first teamers, especially maybe when we talk of Martinelli and Saka, who offer real pace and trickery, and then you get people like Trossard and coming in who don't really offer that level of penetration. So definitely Arsenal have not had as also like similar to Spurs, have not had as convincing a start to the season as people seem to think, I feel.
Yeah, let's see. And obviously, with the game at the weekend, we'll find out more about what this team is made of. But moving on for now, FPL tips. Rather, I know you put pretty furious today. I've not seen you this angry ever, even when you were ranting about the state of the midfield in preseason and stuff like this. Uh, don't tell me you didn't have Ollie Watkins in your team.
Yeah, I think I'm slowly becoming more and more like the person you shouldn't listen to in fantasy. So my entire midfield, except for Saka, who by the way I had on the bench because I put Darwin into the starting lineup this time. Luckily, Darwin got subbed off and Saka came on, and I got his 9 points. It was a pretty dire week for me. I got only 40 points, um, and I've slipped down to sixth now, from 5 points away from the top of the league and not captaining Haaland to now with sixth place. So yeah, from a fantasy point of view, I had Watkins at the start of the season. It was one of our picks. One of our when we discussed it on the pod, Watkins and Isak were two people that we thought would be somebody you can bet on this season, but he's not really had that consistency of output. I think he's always been playing well, but he's not had the consistency of output. And he finally came good. Again, a freak result. right? So you don't see that happen to Brighton very often. But yeah, they got a spanking, and Watkins made the most of that. So yeah, I mean, he might be now in a good run of form. He's always going to get chances. That's kind of the reason why I took Darwin as well into my team. He's always going to get chances. So it's good to have some people like this in your team. But Haaland not scoring, Foden not scoring, Mitoma not scoring, Luis Diaz, Madison not doing anything of note. Yeah, overall pretty bad
Estupinian,
week for me.
Estupinian with a
Estupinian minus
-2.
2 points. Yes, yes, I completely forgot about that. Trippier with 12 points, and I still struggled. So you can imagine how bad this week was for me. Yeah, I had Pedro Porro on 7 points on my bench also. So yeah, overall top-notch fantasy football from me.
Yeah, I think it's going downhill for us. I think we're just going down the drain. But yeah, coming back to real football, RK, I want to talk about United, but I want to give you time to do that with at peace. So we talked about Villa and Watkins and that freak result. Chelsea, Newcastle, Villa, all these teams basically got wins. But another team that got a win was Wolves, surprisingly beating Man City, and their social media account also took a lot of pot shots at Pep Guardiola, because in the run up to the game he had mentioned that, oh, they have these good attackers and they have this Pedro Neto and they have this Korean guy. So when Huang actually scored, Wolves basically just posted saying the Korean guy scores. So it was a good comeuppance to Pep, who I don't know. It's this very irritating habit of his where he keeps bigging up teams who he knows that he's going to basically slaughter. And for once, I think it's good that this has come back to bite him in the posterior. But yeah, decent wins for all these teams, apart from Villa, who actually slaughtered Brighton. As you said, a freak result. But yeah, some teams finally seem to be going in the right direction. Eddie Howe was apparently a threat of being sacked, but Newcastle are s- seemingly moving in the right direction now. They have the Champions League game tonight as well. We'll see how that one goes.
I think what is really coming out as very important against Brighton is that you kind of exploit the high presses, the high regains that you are inevitably going to get if you press well against them. So it's very important in those moments to be really clinical. I think Villa were extremely clinical. They were helped by, would you believe it, some really shit refereeing in that game as well. But which is not a surprise anymore. But having said
There's
that,
a
I think
theme,
Villa were,
RK. There's a theme running through all our games.
yeah, every game you can talk of real blunders. Again, in that particular Aston Villa game, it was striker standing right in front of the keeper and goal given. And I think there was a very clear and obvious foul as well, which wasn't called, and that immediately led to a goal. So Brighton really had the circumstances against them, but like the way that they reacted to it was pretty bland. I thought they didn't really try to get back into the game in a right way. And Aston Villa were really, really smart and clinical. It almost reminded me of, a real, European team, the kind of team that kind of wins trophies in Europe. And then, of course, you think that, okay, clinical teams like these. And then you have Unai Emery, who's, of course, a serial winner as well in Europe. So
Yeah,
you can
so
see where it comes from.
RK, I actually thought they started off the second half really positively in the sense that they had three substitutions. They got some attacking players on the pitch. They got Ansu Fati. They had Tariq Lamptey also come on, and they really bossed it for the first 10-15 minutes of the second half. And I think, okay, game on was what I texted on the group as well when they scored. I think then Villa scored at the absolute perfect time, and that just burst the balloon. And after that, it was a nothing game. But I was actually impressed with their attempt to. Brighton looked at it at halftime and said, you know what, 3 goals, we can do this. And they started off in that note, and then it only lasted 10-15 minutes, unfortunately. But yeah, it was a pretty good game to watch. I think from an XG point of view, they were actually not too far away from each other. But yeah, Villa were just absolutely clinical in their finishing.
Yeah. So now moving on to United RK here. What's going on? Is this a player thing? Is this a manager thing? Rashford seems to be under quite a lot of scrutiny for his actions, not passing to the strikers, trying to take on too many opposition players. Twitter is abuzz with all of this, and there are compilations, counter compilations. It's normal to expect that there's always going to be some talking points, but I think it's been a pretty rocky road for around a month or so, I would say, and this Galatasaray game has probably just added to the pressure, considering another red card for Casemiro as well, added to the injury crisis.
Yeah, I have spent most of my free time trying to think what all is going wrong and how do you explain it. And I have not got any closer to the answer, because while you can explain what is going wrong, you can't explain why it should go wrong. So that is something which I am not able to get my head around, to be honest, that how a team which had reached a certain level at the end of last season, which seemed to make some really good signings at the start of the summer, have a decent preseason irrespective of results as well. You could see things developing. Suddenly, how does everything get blown out in the open air like a real explosion? Where everything that you can think of is pretty much wrong. I After all these years of watching football, I think I'm pretty useless, that I am not able to really make head of tail of what is going on. So when the real crisis kind of started was, I think, against Brighton, where you could say that United had a really good start, had even a decent first half, and then Brighton made certain changes in tactics and then started bossing the game, so that you could explain it away. And it was actually, the explanation for that was that we were out coached and outplayed by the other team, you could say, to an extent, even though United started the game much better, similar to Aston Villa, and they could, if they had been more clinical, they could again have got away with it, which is really important against Brighton. So that is something which you can still kind of, you don't lose too much sleep over it, because okay, end of the day you lost to a better team, it can happen. Then you go to Bayern. Again, they play really good for the first 30 minutes, and then suddenly, and after 32 minutes, it's 2-0 down. Silly errors, which is one pattern which you will continue to see. Silly errors just keep getting repeated out of nowhere. And then United overall don't play extremely badly, but very open. So that's the second theme on top of silly mistakes. Once you are chasing a goal, United are very, very open, and the openness can come at any time. United score a goal, they can immediately concede a really loose goal, as they did against Arsenal and against Bayern. United concede a goal, they can very easily concede another one to go further into trouble. So all these kind of mentality, concentration issues are, what is coming up. And then you see results like, which are the most befuddling, of course, like Crystal Palace, where you barely concede any chances in the whole game. One of them becomes a goal, and then you spend the entire game in the most helpless, toothless fashion, where you can't create chances. So then you think it's also a balance problem, where you're trying to be too safe and you can't create anything. And when you try to be too positive and try to pass forward at every opportunity, then you end up creating some chances, but you are really open at the back because you keep conceding the ball again and again. So it's everything that you can think of in terms of simple defensive organization. If you see the yesterday's game against Galatasaray, simple goals considered in the second half, high XG chances, maybe only three or four high XG chances in a game, but you can't explain how a well coached team can concede such chances. So all things considered, and then you think of man management, you think of games like Crystal Palace, where you don't really see players motivated, you don't really see players really trying to have a lot of off the ball movement, which you see with all the best teams. You don't see that happening, and you think, where is the motivation suddenly? Where is the man management? Or, I mean, what is wrong with how players are reacting? So a lot of, basically, every way you think about it, it seems it seems confusing and befuddling as to how a team which is being coached by one of the better managers you thought in the game is suddenly come to this. But then you also think of Arsenal and Arteta, and I think that's the only silver lining now for United fans, where there's no real way out of this by sacking the manager. I feel you have to. I mean, what do you do if you sack Ten Hag? You sign another up and coming manager, and then of course it's always going to come back to this. I can't see anything else happening with a different manager. So I am just wishing that all the noise about the manager dies down and he really gets 1.5 years more, whatever happens. But I mean, I asked you guys this question at the weekend as well, and I'm really confused. What do you guys think? Like, how can something change so suddenly? You think?
I think it's a mixture of, look, there are obviously off-field things that have clouded quite a lot of things about Man United this season. The Sancho thing, the Anthony thing, the Greenwood thing, all of these, their impact, the injuries to key players, Martinez out, Shaw out right from the start of the season or after one game, something like that. So a lot of plans, like taking a separate example, Chelsea built their attack this season around Nkunku being in the second striker or the number 10 position, and he was injured just before the start, and ever since we've been playing catch up in terms of formation. So you have that disruption right from the start of the season, and it's been Varane, it's been Licha, it's been Shaw, it's been Hoyland's non-availability at the start. Now Casemiro's suspended. So there's no how do you say this? There's no consistency going around in the team selection because of that. So I think that's impacting that as well. But I think along with that, it might also be, I don't know, discontent within the players that has been banded around on Twitter as a potential reason. Maybe there are Sancho sympathizing players who don't feel as into it now. Maybe they think that he's being made a scapegoat out of, because there have been things like, okay, Anthony has a domestic abuse charge on him and he's welcomed immediately back. Sancho is late for training and he's talked about as if he's a stepson or something like that. So I think a lot of these factors combined together, just creating havoc.
Yeah, see, I do think this is a factor. And I mentioned this on our group. I don't know how important it is. Maybe it has very little importance, but I do think it's a factor that players don't like when things that are happening inside the dressing room are paraded in public, simply because they try to keep their public persona as fresh and likable as possible, because all their endorsements, everything about their image, everything is dependent on that. So players don't like when things that are discussed inside the dressing room come out. And I mentioned this on the group as well, and this was a few weeks ago. There are a lot of leaks coming out as well, like, hey, this happened in training, there's a segment of people who are now against Sancho in the club. Like, there are a lot of leaks coming through the cracks at United as well, and this could be a factor. I'm not You can't write that off. But coming
So
to
sorry,
the
Radha, I'm just interrupting you because I just remembered towards the second half of last season, Chelsea had a similar problem of these leaks, and there was a strong suspicion that Mount or someone related to him was part of this leaking mechanism. So now he's transferred to United, and maybe that's causing the leaks in the roof.
I
So
don't
yeah,
I
back to
don't
you.
think I don't think Mason Mount is the problem, but I think the profile is the right profile. What I mean by that is a youngster who's been at the club for a long time, knows how the club works, knows a certain set of values of the club, is feeling perhaps why not somebody like a Rashford or like somebody in that ilk who's been at the club for a long time and is just dissatisfied with how his friend Sancho is being treated. Perhaps it could be something like that. I'm obviously not saying Rashford. I'm just giving you an example of the profile. But anyway, see, for me, that is one aspect, and I think this will always be like a small aspect. I think the main thing is that this was supposed to be the season where Ten Hag gets to play his way. A lot of the recruitment, a lot of the preseason time, because they actually got preseason time for the first time in 2 years only this year. A lot of the talk around Manchester United was, wow, in our first season, we set a base like this. Now, just imagine what we can do once he actually gets the players that he wants, time to train, get his style of football in. It was just written off that the entire last season was just an adjustment season and it was not his style of play, and that we are going to level up now. I think there's a lot of pressure that's been put on that. And the fact that I'm still not 100% certain that the recruitment has been right. I think Sofian Amrabat is a top signing if this is the kind of system you want to play. But Mason Mount was playing that at the start of the season. Now, is Mason Mount the right person to be the supporting aid to Casemiro? That's a question. And you want to play this way where you're constantly pressurizing the ball, but you also need some backup for when you lose the ball. And clearly, Casemiro losing his legs has played a huge impact. So I think a few of these things have happened all at one go. I think Casemiro losing his legs along with the fact that he's trying to make it a more front foot, high press kind of system with new players in certain key positions. I think Hoyland is great. I think Hoyland is going to be a top class player for them. I think Mason Mount as a player is good. He's a very effective player who can be used well. So I think the ingredients are there, but this change in system, along with new people, all of it is happening at the same time. And perhaps they were not there yet. I think the base had to be a little bit more settled from a defensive structure point of view before taking this jump. And if you remember the first few seasons of Arteta, I'm going to say the first 2 seasons with Arteta, they were a boring ass club. They were terrible when it comes to attack. He spent 2 years of time just to get a defensive base set. Now, when he did try to make that jump to a positive transition team, even he struggled. And that was a time where we all said that, okay, this is when I think Arteta is going to get the sack, blah, blah, blah. But that transition season was very hard for Arsenal as well. So that's the hope that United fans can take. I think I'm still I'm still not 100% sold on whether the personnel is perfect for the midfield if they're going to play such a high energy, high intensity game. Um, their right wing has obviously not been helped by all the off field problems. So there are a few things that you can write off, and I think Ten Hag has enough in the bank right now to get some rope. But yeah, like we saw with Graham Potter as well, like the rope only lasts a certain amount. If it keeps going badly, I think it's going to get really bad really fast, which hopefully won't happen.
Like you rightly talked about signings this season, right? And we need to talk about one of them. Onana has, I mean, I never thought I would say this again. Like a lot of things I never thought I would say about United, but I really thought he was going to be a great signing, and probably he still will be. Can't really write it off completely yet, but his performances have been terrible. Especially what the basic things that you expect from a keeper, especially in terms of shot saving. I would say it's been really terrible. He's I think the save percentage is very low for him. Most of the shots that you feel are okay, decent shots where it doesn't come directly at the keeper, go into the back of the net. And he in the initial few games he was really good on the ball. There were games where the opposition had to really adjust to the fact that Onana is playing out from the back, but last few games that's not been the case at all. So there's not real progression, or you don't see a real identity happening just because Onana is there as opposed to De Gea. He has the lowest pass completion rate of aerial balls, I think one of the lowest in the Premier League, 30%. So it's not as if one of the things that he was renowned for is a raking long ball. That also doesn't seem to be working. His short passing from the back doesn't really seem to, as of now at least, resulting in the kind of easy building out from the back, opening up like how Brighton used is what we had kind of thought that this is what Onana will kind of invite the press and allow us to quickly open up defenses. That's not happening. So on and off the ball, I think especially in the last few games, he has been a real disappointment for me. So that is one. Rashford, talking of players who had a great season last time, I think Casemiro, of course, Radha mentioned, and that is probably something that's going to be a real nagging concern for us throughout the season given his age. But Rashford has, I don't know if whether to call it a surprise or not because he goes through these phases every so often, but the decision making is so poor. We do get into good positions at times, but Rashford completely throws it away with the with a completely wrong option. The people who give away the ball the most are Casemiro and Rashford. Most of the time, you see them. If United are having a bad game, these two will be completely, serially giving the ball away. I think Mount. I had my doubts about him when Mount was signed, but I think the last couple of games after the injury, I have been pretty, I would say really encouraged by how he's picking up. I especially the game yesterday, I saw the first half and he looked really good. So I think Mount is one of the players who's coming on. Hoylund, as Radha said, a really good prospect, although he's going to have his ups and downs. There are some really good young players in there who are trying to fill in the numbers, but overall, I think I agree that there's too much flux. There's too many parts which are not working at all, like the centre backs, Lindelof having a terror season, and then you have players like Maguire and McTominay who couldn't leave the club, Van de Beek, and they whatever happens, they don't seem to get a chance. So definitely, people like McTominay, Maguire, Van de Beek, I don't think they are good for the team atmosphere because they must be feeling really hard done by that. Whatever happens, I don't seem to be able to get a game. Especially Maguire, the kind of goals that we are considering must be expecting to start. So, of course, I think there's a lot of things that Ten Hag needs to look at, but I think there's a lot of things that United fans need to, and the board needs to back him in the sense that people do learn sometimes on the job as well, especially coming from the Dutch league, etc., where you don't really get this kind of limelight. You get to make a lot of mistakes in other leagues, but hopefully he gets a long enough rope for us to see better results.
See, I think the point you made, see, you mentioned Van de Beek, and I totally forgot that he existed in life. I just completely lost him from the face of the earth for a while. But yeah, I mean, but Maguire, right? That reminded me of Conte at Chelsea, right? They just kind of he created a very negative atmosphere when it comes to players who are not his choices. Now, if that is a concern, then yes, and you still have them at your club, it can become a brooding, and then it's not even a question who the leaks are. Like you already know who the leaks are going to be in this kind of situation. So that's one. But RK, the point you made about Onana is a very interesting one. I think um, I take for granted just how good Allison is at his job. I didn't even mention him during the game, but he made two incredible saves in the game against Spurs as well. Um, so I was checking the stats when you mentioned that. So Onana is absolutely flat when it comes to goals conceded versus expected goals, post shot expected goals, which means the average goalkeeper of the league or the world is will stop zero, like zero positive, zero negative. He's at 0.3 negative right now. So that's not the kind of performance that any top level keeper would want. For context, Allison is at +2 and Areola is at +4. So they've already saved 4 goals and 2 goals for their teams respectively. So I think people who are flat, and De Gea has had a few seasons where he's been flat as well, closer to zero. So I think that's definitely, and everybody is going to jump to that getting chip wala goal, which is not the problem. The problem is just about these basics. And I think the episode that you missed a couple of weeks ago, we talked about it, where he had a couple of errors in a week in the Champions League and in the league, and it was just not. It was just basic stopping of shots. It was not nothing fancy. It wasn't about passing. It wasn't about positioning. So I think that's definitely something that will only come from confidence, and unfortunately, his confidence is a little down right now. So that's something to watch on. It'll keep all the entire defense will feel more confident with somebody like a confident Onana behind them.
Yeah, and maybe it's also a factor that the defense in front of him is not settled, so that's also not giving him that confidence. But I always get this sense from him that he's one of those too intense guys in terms of, okay, we have to do this, we have to save everything, I have to be aggressive, etc., etc., and maybe that's hampering him during the games. But quickly wrapping up, this weekend we have Arsenal Man City, as we mentioned. So that's definitely our talkie game to watch. What are your thoughts on this quickly? And also, another game to note is Brighton Liverpool. So that these two should be pretty fun to watch, particularly if it's 11 versus 11.
Yeah, I think
Yeah,
one of the things about Arsenal is in the game against United and probably in the Spurs game, I think I missed the episode after that, but Arsenal are really good on the press, like how Radha mentioned that, Arteta worked first and foremost on that. So definitely, even in this slightly poor run that they're having this season compared to last, I'm not saying they're having a poor season by any stretch, but defensively, they still seem to be sound for me. I was very impressed with how they kind of are able to press the shadow as well, which means that they are able to press the man behind them as well, in addition to being able to do high press. So that's a very admirable kind of pressing structure that they have. So, and looking at the first game of the season itself, they have a template to make things tough for City, where they know how to basically crowd out the center of the pitch and basically play a game of attrition against City. So that is one of the things that they seem to be getting better at in a couple of other games as well, even against United. So I think I am expecting a pretty close game. They are playing at the Emirates, and after the defeat against Lens, intensity and wanting to prove something is not something that they will lack. But City will also have the same thing after a very rare loss away against City, against Wolves, and all the memes that came out of it. I'm sure that City will also, Pep will be goading his players. He will be looking out for any lack of, motivation, any sign of complacency in the players after what they have done recently. So, that kind of feeling will be there in both the managers and both the teams. So, but I expect a close game at the Emirates.
yeah. I hope it's as close as 0-0. That'll be perfect. I think, okay, fine, 4-4. Chalo, at least we should get a good match to watch. But yeah, draw, please. Thank you very much. Liverpool, Brighton. I was looking at the games, Spurs and Brighton. I was always a little bit more worried about Brighton. We've ended up losing Spurs, but I think there's a real now fighting spirit around the place. So I think it's going to be a great game, and I'm optimistic about our chances in this game. Uh, I just hope without Jota and Gakpo's out injured as well, he went off in the game. Uh, Darwin is definitely going to start. It's going to be Darwin, Salah, and Diaz. I think that's a handful for any defense. So I hope we can make them pay. It's going to be a great game. City, Arsenal, I think I agree with RK. But yeah, he is hoping for a 4-4 draw. I just want Spurs to draw. Now that they've got two fluke points, I would like them to lose some points, please. Thank you.
Yeah, so finally the graciousness has left Radhaji's spirit, and now he's proper full-on Klopp at the sidelines Liverpool version. Okay, so on that note, we'll close here, listeners, and we'll see you again next week with the outcome of all both of these games and all the other ones as well, including the European games that are going on today and tomorrow as well. So on that note, wish you a fond farewell and see you next week. Bye bye.